Welcome, everyone. I'm Nellie Gontier, Education and Training Specialist at Parkinson Canada. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Coping with Parkinson's Disease, Strategies for the Person with Parkinson's Disease, the Care Partner, and Health Professionals. This webinar covers useful strategies that will help you gain an understanding of common feelings of loss, grief, depression, shame, and stress as they relate to Parkinson's, and will also aid in the foundation of coping strategies that will work best for you. I'd like to take this opportunity to inform everyone that today's session is being recorded for future viewing and can be accessed by visiting our website at www.parkinson.ca and by visiting our YouTube channel, The Knowledge Network. Before I introduce our speaker, I have a few housekeeping points to review. For technical support at any time during the webinar, please click the Tech Support button at the lower right of your screen next to the Ask a Question button. You'll have an opportunity to submit questions at any time during the session from your computer screen by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom right of your screen and typing in your question. Every effort will be made to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We ask that questions are of day. Elaine Book has worked in the field of social work for over 30 years in a variety of community and hospital settings with an interest in the geriatric population. She has worked with individuals, families, and as a leader of support groups. She has become a leader in the Parkinson's community, serving as a speaker at support groups, a presenter at neurology meetings, and a faculty member of the Allied Team Training Program of the National Parkinson Foundation. She is the Center Coordinator for the National Parkinson Foundation Center of Excellence, the Pacific Parkinson's University of British Columbia, and also coordinates design. Elaine.
Thank you, Nellie. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I really do want to thank Parkinson's Canada for choosing a great topic today. I always enjoy talking on the topic of coping because having strategies for coping with PD are essential for living life well with PD. And so with that, my goal is that the content presented today will be useful to people with Parkinson's, for their care partners, for the care partner to help support the person with Parkinson's, and for healthcare professionals working with people with Parkinson's and their care partners. Going from being a well individual to someone with a chronic progressive condition is a major and ongoing transition with many different feelings and emotions. There can be a sense of shock and disbelief, that question about this, it can't be, or anger, why me? There can be fear, anxiety, and sadness. It can produce a sense of the unknown sense of the future. How quickly is this disease going to progress, and how will it be managed? And certainly feelings of grief over perceived and real losses. Losses around health, independence, sense of control, established roles, sexuality, daily routines, and certainly work life as well. One person with Parkinson's said to me, "My place in the world is changing." And his comment made me think of this image of leaves changing color and falling, because with every falling leaf, there is some sadness, there is some beauty, and recognition that this is how a new leaf grows, that this is how living life fully, yet differently, evolves. This word cloud lists a number of different feelings, and they are all quite valid and normal and can be different for everyone and can shift over time. How you manage these feelings impacts how well you manage the PD and ultimately your life with PD. When thinking about managing and coping with PD, it's important to address the often unaddressed feelings of loss, grief, depression, and stress. These feelings and experiences often challenge our coping skills. So I think it might be useful to briefly describe each of them to better understand what you may be facing or not facing at present, but may want to prevent, and then what course of action might be best depending on your experience. What creative strategies can you use to manage the emotions and live life fully with PD? So that's where we're going to start today, talking about some of the emotional challenges associated with PD, and then move into many strategies for coping with PD. I will also present resources at the end for those who are wanting more, and then we'll have some time for questions and your comments, because in many ways, you are the experts. And I also believe that there will be some handouts that will be available electronically. Loss is the experience of parting with an object or a person or a change in a relationship that one values. And losses can be minor or major, and that designation really depends on the perception of the loss by the person who is experiencing the loss, the value the person has placed on what is lost. Grief is that normal package of emotions, the sadness, anger, fear, guilt, all those emotions that accompany the loss of something valued. Now there's our friend Charlie Brown, and he was a sage from years gone by, where he said, good grief, because really grief is not bad. In fact, it is considered to be a healthy process that leads to acceptance and adjustment. Grieving is how we get over things. The experience of loss and grief can be present from diagnosis and throughout the progression of the condition as abilities change. And here are some of the common losses experienced by people with Parkinson's and their care partners. So certainly for the person with Parkinson's, loss of past abilities or present lifestyle, losses around hopes for the future, changes in sexual function, career, income, freedom, independence, and certainty. And for the care partner, also losses and changes around expectations and future plans, certainly privacy, possibly financial security, relationship with the person with Parkinson's and those shared roles and responsibilities. Perhaps the care partner is experiencing loss in terms of social life and hobbies, and even changes in their career. So take some time to think about some of your losses and how you have addressed them. Having an awareness and insight into how and why you're feeling something brings the ability to respond rather than to react. Now, it's important to understand that grief is different than depression. With grief, there can be a mixture of good days and bad days. But with depression, there is more of a persistent, flat affect all the time. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about depression now. Some signs of depression include loss of interest in activities once enjoyed, less energy and more fatigue, difficulty concentrating, sleep disturbances, changes in appetite, and physical symptoms like headaches, pain, or even digestive issues. As some of you may know, 40 to 50% of people with Parkinson's experience depressive symptoms. And the question often asked is whether the depression is neurological and related to the chemical imbalance in the brain, or is it a reaction to living life with PD? And oftentimes it's a combination of both. So again, often then it can be treated by using a combination of both medication and non-medicinal coping strategies. So in terms of treatment, people who are coping with a chronic condition are sometimes reluctant to add any more medications than they're already taking. However, people have had positive results with antidepressant medications. And antidepressants can be helpful to get you through a difficult time and to allow you to get to a place of coping where you can then use other non-medicinal depression management techniques to continue to improve. Things like counseling, support groups, self-help reading, exercise, relaxation techniques like breathing exercises, yoga, meditation, music. People can feel better, but the sooner the depression is addressed, the sooner you will feel better emotionally, which we know impacts the physical well-being as well. I would like to just take a minute to talk about a feeling that is related to depression and not often talked about, yet definitely impacts coping. The invisible symptom of shame that is related to those visible symptoms of Parkinson's disease, like symptoms of tremor, slurred speech, unsteady gait, all of which can be misinterpreted as anxiety, intellectual slowness, or even intoxication. A couple of years ago at the World Parkinson's Congress in Portland, I met a gentleman named Julio Angulo. He is a retired psychologist, a person with Parkinson's, and an avid PD advocate. And he has a particular interest in the topic of shame. And I wanted to share some of his work in particular as it relates to coping. I have listed at the end some additional resources if you would like to learn more about it. So briefly, what is shame? Shame is an emotion that comes from a set of beliefs that one's body and or mind are flawed in some way, that the presumed defect must be kept hidden and a secret kept away from the scrutiny of others, and to do otherwise would really expose one to ridicule, scorn, or rejection. When shame is experienced in public and is mild or moderate, it's known as embarrassment. You feel observed and you would like to escape that situation. But in its more severe form, shame can evolve into humiliation and social isolation as you avoid opportunities for shame, and eventually that can certainly lead to depression. So what can you do about these feelings of shame? And note that the experience of shame can also apply to care partners too, and so as a result, the strategies can be used to manage it as well. Julio suggests the following. Accept the feelings that you are experiencing. Let go of attachments to held beliefs. Grieve what you have lost and focus what you have left. Surround yourself with a network of people dealing with the same condition, and dare to share by talking openly about symptoms. It can sometimes take the bite out of stigma. Identifying the fact that you have PD lets people know that you're okay, and then often if they know that you're okay, then they're okay and supportive. Find ways to navigate day-to-day life in order to maintain what defines you and shows yourself and others that you are still the same person. Reach out and educate. Raising awareness can be very empowering and can mediate feelings of sadness associated with the stigma of PD. For the healthcare professionals who may be listening in, shame and stigma can have a negative effect on psychological well-being, illness progression, and management. And while medications may help treat the more visible symptoms of Parkinson's, identification of the invisible symptoms remain a challenge. And therefore, healthcare professionals need to be aware of the possible Parkinson's stigma and the impact on people with Parkinson's lives. Dispelling certain myths about Parkinson's may help address negative attitudes held by people with Parkinson's. And I would recommend incorporating a holistic, comprehensive assessment to identify perceived stigma in people with Parkinson's and making it a part of every allied health professional's role. And I also have some resources listed at the end, and I certainly encourage you to share them with your team. So the last concept that I just briefly want to talk about before we move on to the how to cope is the concept of stress. Now, there are many definitions of stress there, but here is one that I think is useful. Stress is a word used to describe the body's reaction to a change and is one that requires a physical, mental, or emotional adjustment or response. We all experience stress in our lives, and symptoms of stress can look similar to symptoms of depression, but might also include feelings of irritability, frequent colds, changes in sex drive or use of alcohol, and we all know that feeling stressed can aggravate PD symptoms. An important part of managing stress is awareness and identifying what is causing the stress response in the first place. We often realize that we are feeling stressed, but sometimes it takes taking a step back to assess what might be causing those feelings. Sometimes we can easily identify the cause. It could be a change in symptoms, it could be financial concerns, it could be relationship issues. But sometimes the cause of your stress might be less obvious, perhaps changes in roles or routine. So becoming aware of the cause and noting how you've dealt with stress in the past can be helpful in deciding which strategies you might want to try. So now that I've talked about some of the feelings and emotions related to PD that might make coping a challenge, it's time to focus on the how to cope. How people cope varies greatly. Some people view a situation as highly stressful, while others may not be affected by it at all, by the same situation at all. Some people might have a lot of stress or a lot of loss in their life, yet they seem to cope well, and others might have fewer losses or fewer stressful experiences and are not coping well at all. You may wonder, well, why is that? Coping with PD does involve continuous adaptation for everyone and can really be influenced by a wide range of personal, behavioral, and environmental factors, including inherited traits, past life experiences in general, personality characteristics, certainly your perception of what you're facing, your social support network like friends, family, counselors, financial resources, also individual coping styles. So that refers to kind of your health knowledge, your beliefs, your resilience, as well as other life demands and what else is going on in your life at the same time. Knowing your characteristics and tendencies, having that insight will help you be better prepared to cope with the many stresses associated with living life with a chronic condition, and help you to make positive lifestyle choices and find useful coping strategies for you. Now, there are different types of coping strategies. Task-oriented strategies are where you analyze the situation and you take action to deal with it. An example of that might be, if you find yourself feeling tired after lunch, you might reorganize your day so that you're able to take a nap when you need it. Emotion-oriented strategies, that's where you deal with your feelings and you find support. And that can be with a counselor, attend a support group, or learn from a webinar like today. Distraction-oriented strategies, that's where you use activities to take your mind off the situation. Yoga, meditation, hobby, partaking in a hobby, or volunteering. And certainly many people may use a combination of all three strategies, depending on what it is that they're facing. So here are the top 10 common coping strategies used by people with Parkinson's with young onset. But I do find that these strategies can be used by people with Parkinson's at all stages and caregivers too. So you want to educate yourself about the condition and what to do about it, like what you're doing here today. Exercise, well proven to be very valuable to both mental and physical and cognitive well-being. Be objective about your circumstances. Find someone who can help with this, someone who you can respect and trust to be objective. Take one step at a time, setting realistic goals and realistic expectations. Be aware of your strengths and remind yourself of them. When you're faced with a challenge, it's good to focus on your strengths. Have confidence in your abilities and nurture a positive view of yourself. Think of a challenging situation that you got through in the past. How did you do it? And I would encourage you to write down 2 or 3 of your strengths and write down 2 or 3 ways that you got through the situation. Did you seek support? Did you get organized and make a list? Did you connect with nature? What is it that you did in order to manage that challenge? Reminding yourself of your strengths can help you really build up your resilience. In the handouts at the end that I've provided, there is a strength word list to get you started. And it's a good idea to identify your strengths before a challenge presents itself. It is good to have your strength list to rely on in difficult times that may come your way. Advocate for yourself, for what you need from friends, from family, from healthcare professionals. Maintain a sense of humor. Laughter really is good medicine. It can be a state of mind changer as it releases all sorts of endorphins that make us feel good. Be an active participant in your wellness. And I will talk a little bit more about that when I talk about self-management as a coping tool. Engage family and friend support. You do not have to do this alone. Share what's happening in your life with someone. Connect with others to minimize isolation, and also to maintain a life outside of PD. And lastly, educate others. Again, that can be quite empowering. So here are a few more strategies. Be creative in finding solutions for doing what you like to do. For example, I worked with somebody who used to paint his farmhouse every summer. But now he paints the bottom half, and he hires someone to paint the top half because he no longer feels comfortable on the ladder. I also worked with somebody else who was a master gardener, but she found it just too difficult to get down on her hands and knees. And so she transformed her yard into container gardens. And now she's able to continue to enjoy gardening with the same passion that she had before. Communication is critical throughout the illness and with your family, friends, and healthcare team. It really is about the you and I in your world, and sharing how PD is impacting everyone can lead to a greater understanding and support for all. Gain a sense of control by gaining knowledge about the disease and about community resources. Many people I've worked with have found planning for the future and being proactive a very valuable coping strategy. Organizing important pieces like powers of attorney, representation agreement, wills, advanced care plans can provide a great sense of control and a great sense of relief. Set limits on your time commitments. Prioritize and say no when you need to. Remember, saying no to others is saying yes to yourself. And in fact, no is a complete sentence. such that you do not have to offer an explanation. It is simple and to the point. Consider the use of technology that also might increase independence. Things like a smartphone for medication reminders. There are online exercise programs if getting out of the house is difficult. Things like Lifeline that provide a sense of confidence, knowing that if you are going to fall, somebody will know about it, and other kinds of home adaptations that really increase independence. Think about putting limits on the amount of time discussing PD with your family and friends. Now, it is important to have people to share your concerns and your ups and downs, and we all need to vent sometimes. But at the same time, it can be all-consuming, and it is healthy to focus on other things. Engage in personal and social projects, meaningful life activities. Research has shown that people who actively participate in life experience happiness and well-being. It affirms their unique skills, their value, their identity, and often have greater enhanced relationships and even protect against motor decline. There was recently some research done about volunteering and the value of volunteering with apathy. The concept being that you feel good by doing good. So a lot of the strategies that I've mentioned really fall underneath the concept of self-management. And self-management is an approach that's commonly used in the management of different kinds of health conditions. So there are many definitions of self-management, but basically it refers to the tasks that an individual must undertake to live well. Tasks that include gaining confidence to deal with medical management, role management, and emotional management. So a self-management model in brief kind of looks like this. Be your own therapist, which is really about employing some of the strategies I've just presented, and then asking yourself the following questions. How can I use or develop my strengths? How can my environment be adapted to match my ability? And how can the task be modified to be more simple? There is a lot of support for self-management in managing PD, and a quick Google search will get you to some good information if you want to learn more about it. But there are also some excellent self-management programs across Canada that would be great for getting you started, and I have provided those resources at the end. Now, these are some mantras that people with Parkinson's have shared with me, things that they say to themselves when they are feeling challenged and need to jumpstart their day. And so I wanted to share them with you, and certainly if you have something that you use when you need a boost, a morning mantra, something that helps you get going, please write it in and share it with us. A lot of what I've talked about in terms of coping strategies is applicable and can be useful to both the person with Parkinson's and care partners. But I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk more specifically to the care partners in the audience today. Now, that does not mean that those of you with Parkinson's can tune out for a bit. Quite the opposite. It is important for you to hear about how PD impacts your partner's life and the ways that you can support your care partner. PD affects everyone in the person with Parkinson's world. And as much as you with PD may not need a lot of hands-on support at this time, as a family member, it can be hard to watch someone you care about live with a chronic condition. And this word cloud came from caregivers themselves, gathered at the World Parkinson's Congress that I talked about in Portland last fall. And it really captures, I think, the caregiving experience. So what are some key coping strategies for the care partners? Again, communication is critical throughout the years ahead. The impact of a diagnosis and living with PD can add strain to any relationship. Establish good communication patterns early on, where you talk about concerns, address fears, and make plans ahead of time before change is needed. Attend to your emotions. Often the hardest part for caregivers is dealing with one's own emotions, at the same time as providing care. There may be feelings of anger at the illness, frustration with the limitations it has created, guilt for being healthy, fear about the future, and again, those feelings of grief and loss that we talked about earlier. There's a lot of material available and support groups to help care partners in their role, and we do have a handout on coping strategies that will be available. Strategies for both person with Parkinson's and for care partners. But I encourage you to think about working towards being a responsible caregiver as opposed to a martyr, to remember the importance of taking care of yourself and using supports available, and to encourage as much realistic independence in your partner as you can. The role you play as a care partner has a significant impact on the person with Parkinson's function and on the medical and support team you're working with. So be mindful of how your behavior can positively or negatively affect the patient's day-to-day functioning, as well as the interactions with the supports you are using. It is recognized, and it does not go unnoticed, that it is often challenging to be supportive when you're dealing with the needs of daily living and managing some of your own very real emotions. So getting support in your role is a necessity. It is not a luxury. And it's a necessity to your own wellness and, as a result, to the wellness of the person with Parkinson's. The caregiver self-assessment questionnaire is one way to look at what kind of support you and the care partner might need. The support that you, the care partner, might need. Yeah, it is an insightful tool for caregivers as well as for healthcare professionals. It's helpful in having caregivers look at their behavior and health risks, and can also be helpful in highlighting decisions that will benefit both the caregiver and the person with Parkinson's. The tool can enhance communication between the care partner and the care team by highlighting concerns that might not otherwise be raised during the neurological visit, and can potentially identify any at-risk care partners as well. So I believe it's been included in the handouts as well. The strength and resilience that people show in some situations and the ability to adapt is amazing and inspiring. It is a balancing act and often one of compromises, looking at what is best for the person with Parkinson's and taking into consideration the needs of the care partner. Receiving the support that you need as a care partner will allow you to bring the energy that is needed in a caring relationship. Another coping strategy for living life with PD is the use of life hacks. Now, the concept of life hacks are not new and really do exist in all aspects of life. A life hack is simply something small that you do to make life easier. In the world of PD, an example might be using liquid soap so that you don't drop the bar soap in the shower, or putting a satin sheet on your bed to make it easier to turn over. Other life hacks that I've heard from people with Parkinson's and their caregivers include Magna-Ready clothing, using prepared food services, Dragon technology for writing emails, using gift cards at stores rather than a credit card where you have to punch in your personal code. There's also something called pop sockets for your phone, for your smartphones, that make it easier for you to hold on to. And even something like silicone-based bowls for when you're in the kitchen. Now, I am guessing, or I should say I am so sure, that many of you have a life hack or two that you use to make life with PD more doable, or adjustments that you've been able to make that have helped make an everyday task easier. So please feel free to type it in, and the plan is that we're going to put all these PD life hack ideas together and make them available through the Parkinson's Canada website. There are no right or wrong ways to cope, because everyone is different, with individual styles of coping and various situations. Coping really is a continuous process for people with Parkinson's, and they and those around them must constantly make alterations to their daily lives. Adapting to a chronic illness can be a difficult journey, and having difficulty with that journey is not a sign of weakness or failure. Asking for help takes a lot of courage, and it's actually a sign of strength. Whatever help is needed, it is important to remain open to it, whether it's practical or emotional. Accepting help, both on the part of the person with Parkinson's and care partners, can have a significant impact on managing the disease and really is a key principle in self-management. Try to develop effective ways of asking for help, as others do not necessarily know what you need. It might be easier for you to say, what I would find useful. That might be easier than saying what I need. Attitude is everything. I'm going to share a short story with you. There once was a woman who woke up one morning and looked in the mirror and noticed she had only 3 hairs on her head. Well, she said, I think I'll braid my hair today. And so she did, and she went on to have a wonderful day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and saw that she had only 2 hairs on her head. She said, well, I think I'll part my hair down the middle today. And so she did, and she went on to have a grand day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and noticed that she had only 1 hair on her head. Well, today I'm going to wear my hair in a ponytail. And she did, and went on to have a fun day. The next day she woke up, looked in the mirror, and noticed that there was not a single hair on her head. Yes, she exclaimed, I don't have to fix my hair today. So I share that story to show you that one's attitude can be very impactful. Consider journaling a daily highlight, a gratitude, an unexpected positive or gift, a silver lining, and having a diary like this might be helpful to get you through difficult days. Simplify, streamline, and change expectations. There was a Greek philosopher who said, change is the only constant in life. And think of that jolt, that just one little thing that you can do to make a change, to take a step forward to living life well with Parkinson's. A supporter of the Parkinson's Society BC shared an inspiring perspective after having survived a plane crash. He said that the biggest thing that allowed him to move forward was realizing that his accident did not change the course of his life, but the accident was part of the course of his life. And it certainly it is a challenge to reframe your thinking in this way, but it may help to move forward. I also wanted to share some words from Sonia Masseur, who is a physician and a person with Parkinson's, and she shared this list of things she wished people would have told her early on in her journey, but I really think it's valuable at any stage. She talks about how you can't move forward until you come to some acceptance of it is what it is. That PD does not define you, and encourages people to write down how other people would describe you. Optimism is a choice, and to choose your attitude. Stay engaged in life because that is what defines you. And focus on your abilities. Abandon the fear of the future in order to live in your present. This is a book I also wanted to share with you, written by Newsom, again, another person with Parkinson's, and the book is called Hope, 4 Keys to a Better Quality of Life for Parkinson's People. And he talks about how having hope can take away fear. It can inspire, it can brighten the outlook for tomorrow. It can clear away some clouds of uncertainty. And he declares these 4 words that comprise the essentials of hope. Health. Well, we've talked about that, being open to receiving it, either physically or emotionally. Accepting that you have PD and being open to discussing your condition might open hopeful, helpful doors. Optimism. There are new and more effective medications, more specialists, more money going into research, and there are many people with Parkinson's living a quality of life that was not possible before. Being positive improves your physical well-being and also brings joy to life. Physician, and under that I add the allied health team. Access a team of professionals who specialize in movement disorders. They are a wealth of information with treatment options and strategies. Always be prepared before your visit, including a good sense of how you've been functioning lately and any questions or concerns you might have. And exercise. Again, lots of research out there to support exercise as the best medicine. But really, the support for the value of exercise is something that I hear on a daily basis from the people that I work with. So I really encourage all of you people with Parkinson's, care partners, healthcare professionals, to consider having a look at this book. It really is very practical and inspiring. Know that there are teams of researchers and clinicians out there dedicating time and effort to new treatments and strategies for living life with Parkinson's. And here is a plug for an amazing meeting where researchers, clinicians, people with Parkinson's, care partners, advocates, everyone comes together under one roof to learn and share knowledge. Yes, the next meeting is in fact in Japan, so that will definitely take a lot of planning, but it is a wonderfully inspiring conference. Now, if getting to Japan seems a little bit too challenging, I do recommend having a look at their website because it really does offer some excellent up-to-date articles on a variety of topics. And I want to share this quote with you from a person with Parkinson's. Living with PD is about accommodation without surrender. It's about quality of life within the limitations of the disease. It's about recognizing your limits and recognizing that you can still enjoy life by changing the way you live it. So next up are just a few slides on some books to consider. And I think as it was said at the beginning, this will be archived, so you will be able to go back and look at these resources. There are a number of websites that I also think are great. Some apps for coping. And here are some resources also for the healthcare professionals in the audience, as well as a plug for the healthcare professionals that are in the audience. There's a wonderful conference that's coming to Vancouver in April of 2018. It's the Allied Team Training for Parkinson's Disease program, and it really is an excellent opportunity if you're working in Parkinson's to come and be immersed with other healthcare professionals of your discipline and learn and share with them. And now I think it will be time for some questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Elaine. You've given us some very thoughtful insights and very practical information that demonstrates the importance of self-advocacy and self-management for persons with Parkinson's, as well as self-care for the care partner, and, of course, effective communication for the health professional. As we begin the question and answer portion of our session, we ask that you please take a few minutes to provide us with your feedback by completing a short survey. Your input is important and will help identify topics of interest for future webinars, as well as help us better meet your needs. And we want to remind everyone that you can ask questions by typing in your question in the Ask a Question section at the bottom right of your screen. And we'll open the forum for questions right now. So, Elaine, I've sent you a question that addresses end of life and wondered if you've had a chance to have a look and perhaps provide us with some insights on that.
Okay, so on my screen, I don't see the question. So if you're able to maybe read that to me, that would be helpful.
Okay. We have a participant who addresses the fact that at the moment they're feeling okay, but they understand that as time goes forward, joy and hope will fade for them from their perspective, and they want to know why it's so challenging in certain provinces, especially here in Canada, and they mention Ontario specifically. Why is it so challenging to die in peace when they want to? That's in reference to assisted suicide.
Right. So, I mean, there's been so many advances in that area with the passing of the laws and the MAID, medical assistance in dying, that has really it's just in its infancy stages. But certainly, I think different provinces operate a little bit differently, and certainly healthcare professions. So the physician who you may be seeing, everybody has their own philosophical beliefs around that. But that is certainly something that is being made accessible. No pun intended on the word "made," but it is being much more accessible, much more talked about. Different health authorities having plans, programs, staff in place to help people work through those decisions. So perhaps it just means reaching out to somebody, perhaps a social worker that you might be connected with, or somebody in the community who might be able to connect you with the organization close to where you're living so that you can explore these conversations now. Really it's about gaining knowledge, because you might learn something about it that might end up changing your mind or reaffirming what you think you would like to do. So now is an excellent time to do that research.
Thank you, Elaine. That's a wonderful, wonderful advice. We have another participant who is asking about, I guess, they're saying that they feel powerless. This is the word that they used, especially with a partner who has young onset Parkinson's disease, who is not responding well to levodopa. And they are finding, that the challenges are increasing, especially because they were only diagnosed 2.5 years ago, and things don't seem to be working. What suggestions would you have for someone who's dealing with this?
So, my first thought is connecting to, we don't know this, but, whether or not they are connected to a movement disorders specialist as opposed to a general neurologist. The general neurologists we work with are invaluable to supporting our patients in between visits, but to actually connect with a movement disorder specialist, and generally they have a team of allied health who can also be connected to as well. So a physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, possibly a speech therapist, a social worker, a nurse, and all of those people really play such important roles in the puzzle of living life with Parkinson's. Everybody can contribute a pearl here or there that can be so impactful on your life. So I think my first and foremost suggestion would be to connect with the health professionals who are experienced in working with Parkinson's disease.
Thank you. Another topic that's come up is the safe space for communication with the care partner. How do you develop a sort of a time, a place, an environment where you and your care partner, so the person with Parkinson's and their care partner, can sit and discuss things like, sexual function and intimacy and things like that? How would you develop that?
Well, that's a really great question. Timing, first of all, I think my first answer to that is timing is everything, right? With busy lives and other commitments and things like that, you really have to pick and choose the time of day that's going to work best. So end of day may not be the best time when everybody is tired, or rushing out to an appointment may not be the best time. Sometimes people actually even kind of do this in a bit of steps. So they might start with a conversation about, I'm recognizing that we need to have communication times. We need to have safe space time. I love that wording. And then just simply, rather than getting into the actual meat of the conversation, let's just talk about how are we going to make that happen. I had one couple that I worked with who every month on the date of their anniversary, so if their anniversary was November 12th, then December 12th, January 12th, and going forward, on the 12th of every month was their date to have these conversations. And it worked out really well because it's always a date that was kind of in their heads, and it was agreed upon, so there were no surprises. They each had time throughout the month to think about stuff that they really thought went well or things that needed to go better. And so it was kind of like a month in a review, but again, it was this designated time that was established. It was agreed upon. There were no surprises. So that's one way. So I would start off by just kind of, before getting into the conversation, look at the when and the how of how these things can begin. And
Wonderful.
Then
yeah.
Go in.
No, go ahead.
No, that's all. And then set up the times to have the conversation.
Excellent. And no anniversaries would be forgotten at that point either.
That's right.
Another question that's come up. My spouse feels he's not depressed, but he seems so unmotivated to do anything. This participant says they hear about apathy and Parkinson's, and they're wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Oh, sure. Really good question. So, you may or may not know that about 30% of people with Parkinson's develop apathy, and it can be present from very early on and can also not necessarily even be related to motor symptoms. It can happen with depression or without depression, though it is quite tricky to differentiate whether it's depression or apathy, and treatment for it is quite challenging as well. There isn't really a pill that works for apathy. It really is more, apathy busters are really more some of those self-management strategies that I talked about. Things like goal setting and helping your person with Parkinson's set up realistic, doable plans. And it's really helpful if they can kind of have a cheerleader or a coach behind them to help them stay accountable to that plan. And the other really important piece with making those plans is, well, I said the realistic, doable part of it, but also what is your confidence that you're going to be able to follow through on that plan? Because if the confidence level is quite low, well, then we're just kind of setting somebody up for disappointment. And so it's really important to come up with a plan and then look at it and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'm pretty confident that I can do this. I'm on a 7 out of 10 that I could make this plan come together. So goal setting, motivation strategies, realistic plans, and then I did talk about that volunteering concept as an apathy buster, that giving is good for the soul, and doing, you feel good by doing good. Mm-hmm. And then one other idea around apathy that I had, that somebody shared with me actually, is if you have like a leisure interest list, and if you Google leisure interest list, you'll get this list of pages of different kinds of interests and hobbies. Because sometimes when you're asked, oh, what would you like to do in your retirement, or what would you like to do now that you're off work, it's kind of hard to just pull that out of a hat. So this is a list that then's right in front of you. You may see things on that list that you actually used to do and really enjoyed doing, or you may see something that you never even thought of, but wow, that sounds really neat. And so you can kind of go through that list and you can say, I used to do that, or I'm doing that less than I used to, or I would really like to do that. So those are a couple of ideas of how to support someone who's dealing with apathy.
Excellent. Thank you. And this next question comes to us from a healthcare provider. It's on the topic of feelings of guilt, and they basically have said that they see, whether it's staff or the care partners of persons with Parkinson's feeling guilty. The person with Parkinson's may feel guilt for the impact PD is having on their lives and the lives of others. The care partner might feel guilt for being healthy and able to do so much more. Do you have any suggestions to help people with feelings of guilt?
Mm-hmm. So, whenever somebody ever tells me that they are feeling guilty, my initial reaction is that's probably one of the most unproductive emotions that we can all feel. And it can really be related to anger and to being angry with yourself for something. Even though intellectually we know that we can't undo the past or that we can't change certain things, sometimes our inner self just does not let us off the hook. Our actions or our omissions of actions just keep coming back. It's that could have, should have, would have kinds of thoughts. And with guilt, it's just really important to be kind to yourself, be self-compassionate, and to forgive yourself. You want to acknowledge what those guilty feelings are, like really think. So you feel guilt, but what is that really about? And sometimes it's helpful to express it in writing or in conversation. So the idea of journaling or expressing it, because a hidden secret guilt can stay with you for a very long time. But once that guilt is out in the open, it loses some of its power. It loses some of its hold on you. And I think sometimes it can be really helpful to hear from somebody that the world is actually not judging you. And the other thing to do is to turn it around. If what it turns out that you're feeling guilty about, if you heard that from somebody else, if a friend of yours came up to you and said what you're feeling, would you judge them negatively? Likely not.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine. This has been a very, very important session, and we've touched upon some very, very significant aspects of living with Parkinson's. So I'd like to thank you again, and on behalf of Parkinson Canada, I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. If you'd like more information on coping with Parkinson's or to access a recording of this webinar for future viewing, please visit our website at www.parkinson.ca. If you have any further questions regarding today's session, please feel free to contact us by email at info@parkinson.ca or call us toll-free at 1-800-565-3000. And as we sign off, we at Parkinson Canada would like to wish you all a wonderful day.